Hi, Pauline.
Hi.
Hi,
How are you?
Pauline.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, nice to see you. Hi, Nicola.
Hiya, you alright?
Yes, thank you for joining us. I thought it might have been difficult for you with it being tea time.
No, he's had his tea and he's all sorted in front of the telly, so I've got some free time.
Ooh, thanks. Hi, Anne.
Hi.
And hi, Amy.
Hi. Hi.
And is that Janet?
Yes, hi. I might come under David Farnell.
Yeah, I can see that, but I guessed it was Janet.
Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely.
I saw you on the television, Janice, yesterday.
Oh,
Was it
gone on.
yesterday before, was it?
I think it was Monday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
saw you. Well done, you. Well done, you.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
Well, it was mostly, about what Janice has done. She's worked really hard. Hi, Janice. Hi, Stuart. I can see a few more now. Yeah. Karen, hi. Brigitte, hi.
Hi.
Oh, Stuart, yeah, lovely.
oh, I've gone. What's happened here? Oh.
Hi, David and Sandy.
Hello.
Hi.
Sorry, technical problems, but I've fixed them
Good.
for now.
Hi, Steve.
Pauline.
And Merlin, hello.
Oh. Where am I now?
Yeah.
Down there. One is up for this one.
That's this one, yeah.
Ed.
Oh, that's it. These are my knee.
Okay.
Hi, Maria. Hi, Karen. And I think we're joined by Joyce on the phone.
Yes, Pauline, yeah, I'm here, love. Hi.
Oh, well done.
Hi, Paul. Hi, Joyce.
Hi.
Hi, Tommy.
Oh,
I don't understand why I can't see myself on the laptop. Can you see me on there, or?
Who is it speaking?
Janet, sorry, it's Janet.
No.
Right, but you can hear me though, so I can hear you all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Vicky, are there many other people waiting to get in?
I was told, Pauline, there's 18 people waiting to join the meeting.
Oh, right.
There's not anymore. I think that might have been us in the waiting room, but we've got 22 participants and there's no one waiting to get in.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's lovely. Well, can I give a very warm welcome to you all? Apologies for us having to change the time, but I think a lot of people will understand why we've done that. And let's hope that it has been worth our while to change the time. And People can do their very best. Nobody can ask more than that of them, can they? So a very warm welcome to everybody who is with us for our meeting, especially if you're here for the first time. But I also want to give a very warm welcome to Spurrell, who is the new Police and Crime Commissioner for Merseyside. And we want to congratulate her on her appointment. It's a very important role. And we were very pleased that she joined the webinar that we had before the election, and she took part in that. And she also took the time to answer all the questions that we sent in by email following it. She was the only one of the candidates who did reply to us. So thank you for your diligence, Emily, and for completing it all responsibly. So we are really, really pleased that you are here. I have had apologies. I've had apologies from Sue Tootle, Pat Woodhouse, Sandra and Alan Thurn, Alison Pepper from Carpenters, from Kerry and Phil Lloyd, and from Andy Codd from Liverpool City Council, who unfortunately cannot join us because he is responsible for feeding and putting his children to bed at this time. And so he would have been by 7:30, but unfortunately he can't join us, so he has sent his apologies. I hope that you are all happy that we are recording this meeting. It will be very useful for the minutes, and I know that the Commissioner's Office are very keen to use the comments from this meeting in the police and crime plan. So the first item on the agenda after the minutes, after the introductions, is the minutes of our last meeting. You all should have received those. Does anybody have any questions or queries about them? Well, that's good, because it saves us a bit of time, gives us a bit of extra time for Emily to be able to speak to us. So Emily, can I hand over to you now, please? And thank you once again for giving this opportunity to listen to you. And I hope that later you will be able to take some questions and comments from us. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Can I just ask, there's a couple of people still not on mute. If I could just ask you to mute, just so I know everyone can hear what I'm saying and I can then hear your questions as well. No, thank you for that. And thank you, Pauline, for a very warm welcome. You know, road safety is one of those issues that I will confess to not being an expert in, but I know how important it is. I found the hustings that we did before the election really useful. And I know some of you were there, and I think you were quite probing and challenging, but that's really useful for me in terms of what things I need to be challenging the police about and what things I might want to include in the police and crime plan, for example. So it was a really useful discussion, and I'm hoping this will, you know, be a similar discussion tonight in terms of what I want to include in the police and crime plan. Just before I put the presentation up, if I just give you some context. So as a police commissioner, I am responsible for delivering a police and crime plan. Every PCC has to do one. It's a kind of, it's the formal document that basically says what are my priorities going to be. So it will determine things like my priorities in terms of community safety. So how will I work with the different partners? How will I direct funding? But also importantly, how will I hold the police to account? So it's a document that I will use to kind of sit down with the chief constable and say, right, you know, the people in Merseyside have told me that road safety is a priority. What are you doing about that? How are we improving? How are we tackling those figures of numbers killed and seriously injured, for example, on the road? So it's a really useful document. And I think this is why it's important that it has the buy-in from the public and that it reflects, you know, the needs of local residents. And it will be in place for just over 3 years up until the next election, and then with a bit of time after that. So it's an important document. So I'm really glad, I'm really grateful that you've given me the time today to talk to you about it. So Vicky, can you put the slides up for me?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So there's only 5 slides to go through, so it's quite brief. And to be honest, I'll skip through because this is basically the broader plan. This is kind of the broader strands and the pillars, whereas I know that you will obviously be very interested in particularly the road safety issues. So you know, I welcome thoughts and issues about all of them, but I won't go into too much detail because I know you'll probably be more focused on the road safety element. So basically I've summarized it into 3 strands, or 3 kind of pillars, as you were. So sorry if you go back.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So fighting crime and proactive policing. So this is the first one. So this is very much, I think, the kind of bread and butter of what we expect from the police. So serious and organised crime is a priority. You know, unfortunately, we know that Merseyside does have a real challenge around guns and gangs, around county lines, where we have young people being kind of exported across the country to sell drugs. We have thank you. We do unfortunately have issues around serious violence and knife crime and homicide. And so I think it was important that we acknowledge the challenges we still face on Merseyside. And the police are doing a lot of good work on this, but I was really keen that it stayed as a priority to make sure the police are being held to account as to how they're doing that. And I've also included in there retail business crime and also fraud and cyber crime. They quite often are linked to those organised crimes. Those organised gangs who might be operating, they quite often feed in, and they might use online crime and online fraud, for example, as a way to fund their activities. So that's why that's all included within that priority. The second one then is around local, visible and accessible policing. So this is probably the #1 issue that came up on the doorstep during the campaign. And I know it's a big issue for people, and it's about seeing the police. It's about seeing them be proactive and actually be out there, you know, doing the job, enforcing the law. So inquisitive crime is things like robbery and burglary, and the kind of day-to-day activity, making sure that is done and that is done properly. And then I've included road safety in here as well. So obviously road safety, and for those of you who remember from the hustings, you know, it is very much a partnership approach. We very much need to work in partnership, you know, with the road safety partnership, do a lot of good work. But I think there was a real feeling that people wanted to see the police being proactive and going after those, you know, speeders and the drunk drivers and the people on their phones, and actually being quite kind of targeted around going after these people that we might see behaving dangerously. So I've included it in there as that kind of accessible, visible policing presence, because I want them to know that they need to be proactive and continue to kind of go after people who we know are dangerous on the roads. And then I've also included some comments there in terms of neighbourhood policing and relationships, and that partnership. So actually, you know, we want people to know who their local PCSO is. We want people to feel like they have a good neighbourhood team, maybe linking in with their local councillors. It's really important that actually we have kind of a base of local community police officers who understand the local needs and understand the challenges that might be faced from there. And then the other point there as well is about estates. So very much looking at actually what does that mean in terms of a police building. So for some people, it's about the city police. Oh, sorry, David, can you go mute for me? Thank you. So it's very much about, obviously, you know, we want to see police officers walking down the street, but how do you feel about a police station? Do we need a police station? How important is that to you, given that there's only so many limited resources that we could put into them? So I'm really keen to get your feedback really about that whole kind of visible and accessible policing picture. Next slide. There we go, perfect. So the next one then is around supporting victims and safer communities. So the supporting victims strand is very much around, we know that, you know, at the heart of every crime is a victim and somebody who has been impacted by that. So what can we do to try and make sure that we're putting the right support around them, and putting that wraparound support, making sure that they are, you know, feel like they're getting that kind of support to go through the criminal justice system, but also making sure that we're listening to them, taking on board, you know, what they're telling us. We're not making we're understanding some of the experiences that they might be going through. So I've highlighted there are a couple of key issues around, for example, tackling violence against women and girls. This is a big priority for me. We've just had a report out today from the HMIC, which says that actually there is a huge challenge. There is an epidemic of violence against women. We know that it very often goes hidden and unreported. So how do we make sure that we're spotting these incidents and being proactive in supporting victims and keeping women safe? And then similarly with things like hate crime, you know, unfortunately, we've had a couple of incidents recently in the city centre of a homophobic attack. We really need to kind of make sure that we're getting a handle of this, recognise the impact, the additional kind of trauma that a victim of hate crime can experience, and look at what support we're putting in place to tackle it. And then victim services as well. So as a PCC, I'm responsible for commissioning victim services. Unfortunately, it's limited to specific crime types, but I want to make sure that I am looking after victims and making sure they're getting the right kind of referrals to the right services to support them in the aftermath. And then safer communities. So again, you know, when we talk about the impact of crime, quite often it isn't just one victim. There might be a whole community that can be affected by something. So I've included there around modern slavery. You quite often might get, you know, slaves being kept in houses growing cannabis and growing weed, and you know the impact that can have in terms of antisocial behaviour on a local community. There's obviously the broader challenges around ASB, that what might start off as quite low level but actually can escalate quite quickly. So there's lots of real challenges, I think, around that, and making sure the police don't lose sight of the impact of things like ASB. And then I think this is where some of that community engagement and again that partnership working comes in. Being able to work with our communities to empower our local communities, to make sure that actually, you know, they're feeding us the intelligence, that they feel that if there's things that particularly need addressing, we've got a real strategy that we're working with the local community to find the best response for them. So I'm really keen that actually that community engagement, and particularly from a policing point of view, we know there are lots of communities who are mistrustful of police, you know, for very legitimate reasons. How do we repair those relationships? How do we kind of, you know, rebuild that confidence that the police will take them seriously and will respond properly? Now, you'll also notice I've been putting equality and diversity considerations throughout the different sections. I think it's important. This will be a strand that will probably run throughout the whole plan, to be honest, but I just wanted to highlight it here because actually we know that different communities will have different needs, and actually that relationship with the police will be different, that relationship with other agencies will be different. So it's important that we acknowledge that and make sure that we give them the right response based on who they are and the type of community that they are, and also looking at how the police, for example, can diversify. How can we improve our diversity of police officers and improve that engagement then with communities who might not currently recognise themselves in the police force that we have on Merseyside. Okay. So the final strand is around driving change and prevent offending. So this is very much the prevention arm. So the early intervention, how do we stop crime from happening in the first place? So the early intervention and prevention box there, I talk a lot about young people. How do we divert young people away from criminality? We know there's lots of challenges around them. They're exploited into criminality, you know, because of a lack of opportunity or because of abuse they might have suffered, or they're vulnerable in some other way. How do we actually start to tackle that in a more kind of efficient way and actually get upstream to stop them actually getting to that life of crime? And then similarly, when you look at things like mental health and drugs, mental health in particular, we know can be an underlying kind of factor in people's offending. And actually, the last thing you need is to be arrested or to see a police officer. What you really want is somebody who from the care sector, from the NHS, from healthcare, who can give you the support you need to actually deal with your mental health crisis and not arrest you, because that doesn't necessarily tackle the cause of their offending. So looking at all of that kind of wider early intervention prevention work, I think is going to be really key. And I'll just highlight another one there as well in terms of the designing out crime. So this probably fits into what I spoke about in the hustings before the election, in terms of how do we design our roads to be safer. So if we've got an issue with scrambler bikes, or the big thing at the minute seems to be e-bikes, which are just causing absolute nightmares on the roads, how do we design our streets so actually, they can't necessarily access that? Or particularly the big kind of scrambler bikes, how do we block off paths where we know they're causing trouble? Or there's been an issue with loads of cars parking on Wavertree Park, for example, Wavertree Sports Ground. Why are we blocking it off? Let's just block it off so cars can't get on there in the first place. Little things that actually can go a long way to stop crime from happening in the first place. So thinking about that wider piece of work in terms of designing out crime, I think is important as well. And then finally on this slide, the second box is around the fair and effective criminal justice system. So just to give you some context, as a police commissioner, I'm sorry, David, you've gone off mute again. Would you mind muting? Thank you. As a police commissioner, I have specific oversight and specific powers in terms of the police, and the ability to hold them to account. I don't have those same powers with other agencies within the criminal justice system, but I am expected to kind of bring them all together, and we have a bit of a frank discussion around what we could be doing better. And I will kind of challenge those agencies in a slightly different way. So the Merseyside Criminal Justice Board is the avenue I use for that, to say, well, actually, once you've left the police and maybe you go to the Crown Prosecution Service, what are they doing? How are they deciding whether to charge? What information is being given to the victim, and then all the way through to the courts, and what support they're getting at court level, and how do we kind of look at that whole process really. And I've identified there in a specific example around female offenders, and also looking at things like restorative justice. I am really keen that we divert people away from prison as much as possible. There are huge numbers of people in prison, particularly female offenders, who are in prison for very low level offences. And actually, they're in there for such a short amount of time, you don't end up addressing the reason for their offending. And it comes back to that earlier point around early intervention, in terms of quite often it's mental health, quite often they've suffered trauma as a result of domestic abuse, or there might be drugs or alcohol involved, you know. And actually, if we just keep putting them into prison for 6-month sentences, they lose their home, they lose any access to support, and then they're out again. What do? They go back to where they started. So we need to be having a much better conversation about diverting people away from prison. And restorative justice is a good example of that, in terms of how can we engage the partners in terms of saying, well, actually, do you understand the impact of the crime? You know, is there another way that you could make amends to that, and actually give some closure to the victim around, you know, why you committed that offence, and trying to kind of give them an opportunity to move on and understand why they were targeted in particular. There's a lot of value in restorative justice and how we use that. So lots of work, I think, there in terms of improving the criminal justice response to various different crime types. Thank you. And then I just wanted to put this up just to give you some context. So one of my pledges during the election was around being a visible and responsive PCC. You know, hopefully you've seen lots of activity and things I've been doing. I'm really keen that continues. A big part of my role is the police scrutiny, and something I want to make sure is much more front and centre, so you can see some of that. So we're developing a programme at the minute in terms of how we scrutinise the police, and that will be an opportunity for me to challenge them and say, you're not doing enough, or, you know, the figures are very high in this area, what are you doing to tackle them? But also looking at the tools they use. So for example, things like stop and search, are they using those in a proportionate way? You know, are they using them, are they being effective in how they're being used? And then the other side to that is the PCC accountability. So I think it's only fair that I make it clear that actually I'm still accountable as well to the public. And, you know, the work I do and meetings like this obviously give me an opportunity to talk about some of that work. But I'm also held to account by the police and crime panel, who will I will meet with regularly, and they'll challenge me in terms of what I've been doing within my role. And then I'm also looking to set up a wider role for victims, for example, so that actually they have an opportunity to say, well, are you doing enough in terms of delivering on what you said you were going to deliver on? And then the very last slide is just around that partnership, and you'll have heard me say all the way through that, and it is something that I'm very, very keen on. It's also something that is very much written within my job description. The legislation for my role says you will work in partnership because you cannot police your way out of the issues. And it's very relevant when we talk about road safety. And I mentioned it before, working in partnership is the best way to actually achieve some of those results that we all want to see. So there's some examples there of the type of partnership work that I would do. But obviously there's lots more examples of that in terms of seeing it in practice. But I just wanted again to highlight that in terms of when I draft the plan, this will be something that will feature quite strongly, is how I work in partnership with the different agencies. So I think that's it for the slideshow. Thanks, Tor, if you want to. Thank you. So I'm very happy to take questions now, or any suggestions. You know, obviously you've got a very strong interest in the road safety area, so if there's any particular things you'd like to see under that section, let me know. Or if there's anything glaringly obvious you think I've missed, again, let me know. Or is it all wonderful and perfect and I've covered everything? In which case, that's also welcome as well.
Thank you very much for that, Emily. I'm sure that people have some questions they would like to ask you. I have been sent a few questions by some people who aren't able to be with us, and I have some questions too. But I think I ought to offer our members the opportunity to speak to you first. So if anybody would like to ask the Commissioner a question, do you want to raise your hand like this, and I'll try, or I know that there is a technical way that you can put your hand up. But is anybody wanting to start? Merlin, was that you who were wanting to do something?
Yeah, yes.
Thank you,
I have to go
Merlin.
back now. Yeah. You have listed quite a number of stuff here, a lot of stuff. And I'm just wondering, how long do you think it'll take you to implement some of these? Now, I wouldn't say all of them, but let's say half of this stuff. Do you have enough staff to help you? Do you think you have the ability to coordinate with the various people in order to get some of these things going? Okay.
It's a good question. It is a lot. So a lot of the work, the priorities that I've identified, it is not something that necessarily will be done and delivered and that's the end of it. I think there's going to be a lot of ongoing work. So predominantly it's going to be around holding the chief constable to account. So to be fair, there is lots of work already happening from the police perspective around the issues that I've identified. So I don't think any of this will be a surprise to the police. What it's about is just saying, well, is the work you're putting in place, is it working? Is it having the desired effect? So the honest answer is no, we're probably not going to solve it all. I think, you know, the nature of crime is complicated and, you know, it can be impacted in lots of different ways that, you know, we haven't even necessarily predicted yet. But I think it's about what are the areas that you think we should be focusing on and how do I challenge the police? Where should I be saying to the police they should be focusing their efforts? So there are still challenges in terms of police officer numbers. So for example, so we are starting to see them creep up a bit, but we have had them cut for many, many years. So there is going to be challenges around delivering some of this work. But actually the conversations I've already had with the chief is that they already have, you know, kind of groups already focusing on lots of these priorities. So I think the hope is that I'll just keep challenging them to kind of make sure they are keep putting the resources into the right place. And I think the other part, the other side of my job is around being that vocal kind of voice for the region and for the police. So actually where we say we have a real challenge, for example, in domestic abuse, we need some more staff, we need some more trained detectives, we need some more police officers who can provide that response. I will be going to the ministers and saying we need more because this is a real problem area for us. Or indeed road safety, you know, we need more investment because we need some more road safety officers. And so I think it's about working through that with the chief to say, actually, these are the priority areas. This is what the community want you to focus on. And then as we go through, if the demand is too high, we keep making those challenges to the government to say, actually, we need more resources to be able to deliver on this work. Because it will be a long piece of work. It's not something that I'll probably be able to deliver within my first term. Hopefully there'll be some specifics in there, some projects that will absolutely come to fruition. But I think the bigger challenges will probably be a longer journey.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Emily. I know that resources is something that I was going to ask about. And I obviously the more traffic police that are able to deal with the problems on the roads, then the better. And perhaps it might be that it's not just the traffic police who have to deal with these things. It may be, you know, we can roll out some of the duties that they have to other police. But I think Tommy was putting his hand up to ask a question.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I was wondering if we may see more police officers on the beat. Where I live, Old Swan, I've noticed that we've got lots of community support officers, and also I've noticed that the police are on the beat with them now. Is that something we're going to see more of, do you think?
Well, I hope so. It's a good question. It's one of the things that I have said to the chief, the public want to see. You know, we know they want to see more police on the streets. So I mentioned at the end, one of my last slides about the force inspection meetings that happen. So I'm currently thinking, I basically decide what theme I'm going to focus on. So I'm thinking that the first formal meeting I have with the chief and the senior officers, and it'll be a public meeting so I can share the information with you, will be to look at where, so it's what they call Operation Uplift. So these new police officer numbers that are starting to come in, where is the chief putting them? And do we feel that she's putting them in the right place? So it might be that she's dedicating more to the local policing team. So you actually see them out in the streets more, which is great. But we need to ask the question, is that the right place? Are they having the desired effect? Or, you know, or should they be more in the roads enforcement team? You know, like it's about that constant balance. So one of the questions I'll be asking her is, you know, where are you putting your police officers and how are you making sure there's as many out there being visible as possible? Because we know that's something the public really want.
Yes, I was only going to say it's something that you don't seem to see now, a police officer on the beat anymore.
No.
And I've noticed now around where I live, they're in twos now with the police officer and a community, is it a community support officer?
Yeah,
And,
yeah, PCSO, yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
And,
well, that's welcome feedback, because I know that I have been, you know, asking her to make sure that's there. So that's positive if that's happening. I think as well, we should see some more PCSOs because there are a few vacancies. So again, they might start to increase in numbers. So that'd be helpful as well.
I can confirm there's a lot of them in Old Swan and Tubury who are well covered by the PCSOs.
Good, excellent. That's positive feedback. I'll feed that back.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Next question.
I think Paul's got his hand up.
Paul.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I just wanted to just really for your own information and the information of the last questioner that we've invested quite heavily in training police and PCSOs to ride their bikes now. So whilst you might not see them walking, you will see them on bicycles where they're a bit more approachable. And it's sort of striking a fine balance between being able to respond quickly and cover distance and also being approachable for communities like the last questioner. So that's something you will see a lot more of, hopefully going forward, is cyclists, police on bikes, and getting out there and meeting people.
Thanks, Paul. I didn't realise that was you. Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, so there you go. They're listening. They're taking a lot of this stuff on board, which is good.
Thank you, Paul. Next question. Right, well, I've been sent some questions, so perhaps I could read one of those for you, please.
Yeah, absolutely.
What measures are being taken to address the problems posed by the current promotion of electric scooters, which appear to be dangerous not only to riders, but pedestrians and road users? And I think that also applies to the scrambler bikes and to the e-bikes. And you have touched on those questions a little bit, but I know that this sort of question is causing a lot of distress to a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. I had a meeting with the Safer Roads team and the Roads Policing Unit this week, and I hadn't realised quite actually the extent of the e-bikes and how much they're being used by organised gangs, for example, because they're a lot quieter than scrambler bikes. So actually there's a real, again, you know, the way that everything links together, there's a real link with the organised crime activity in terms of e-bikes. And so many of them are being altered so they can get up to speeds. They were saying there was something like 90 miles an hour. They were altering them, which is just terrifying. So so we did have this conversation with the Roads Policing team. They are looking to speak to some of the manufacturers, for example, to look at what more can be done to try and stop people manipulating it to make them more dangerous. And they are looking at those kind of things. I mean, Paul, you might know more, I think, in terms of what else happening on the ground. There's loads of stuff that they were doing.
Yeah, I mean, I know they are a real challenge to deal with, and like you say, the use in crime is widespread and they're so hard to police as well. And it's also the issue of them being sold in, certainly these scooters, they're widely available in places like Halfords and other big distributors, and it's seemingly, I'm not too sure that at the point of sale that there's enough advice being given to buyers really around the legality of them. And I think that's something we could address as well, you know.
Yeah. I think as well, there's probably a wider conversation in terms of the law around them, because actually the technology is coming out fast and the law can keep up with them. So particularly when you look at the e-scooter issue, you know, we've obviously got Voy, which is the pilot in Liverpool, but that doesn't mean that other e-scooters can be used. And I think there's still a confusion around people with their private scooters, and that doesn't apply. But it's very confusing. So you've got these big pilots and these projects coming out, but the law isn't necessarily catching up. And so the police are constantly referring these issues into kind of the national conversation to try and make sure that we, the government, try and look at how the two conversations link together, if you see what I mean. So there is a real challenge around it.
Thank you, Emily. Anybody else with a question?
I think I'd just like to make a point as well, Paul. You're looking at the PowerPoint slide that the PCC has shown. it really does hit home. Obviously, I'm aware because I work within the police, but it really does hit home the wide range of demands that are placed on the police and how road safety is almost competing with all those other demands for the police's time. And it's a really difficult thing to do. And I think we've made great strides. I think you'd agree over the previous few years, getting road safety up that priority list, if you like. And I think it's so important that we keep it up there fairly high. I know it's difficult with all those other the various organised crime and drugs and violence and stuff, but it really is up there with the violent crime as well. It needs to be maintained at a high level, I think, of enforcement. I think you'd agree.
I think as well, just to add, I've been quite impressed actually since I've come into office and seen actually how much work is being done. And I do sometimes think that the roads policing team and the safe roads unit get a bit of a a raw deal, because people are saying it's such a huge challenge. There are so many cars and drivers and people just driving responsibly that actually you're never going to get to all of it. But actually I've seen just how much work is being done. So I think there's an element of a communications thing that we need to do in terms of reassuring people that they are trying to get to all those hotspots, and they're working with councillors and they're working with the communities to try and get the enforcement in. And they've just created a new team that will kind of focus on a particular area of enforcement to try and relieve the pressure on those kind of day-to-day pavement parking issues that we know are perennial issues. But it's just about trying to get a resource. So I do think there was a lot more going on than I think even I realised, in all honesty, before I got elected. So there's a lot of work, I think, to try and promote that as well to the community and obviously partners like yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody, Amy?
Hi, Emily. Just following up on that. At the hustings, we were pushing you around transparency, and because at present we have to wait until October for the Home Office to publish the statistics before we can find out what the police have done in the previous year. And so I don't know how often you get data on what the police have been up, drink driving, careless driving, speeding offenses. I don't know if you provided that on a monthly or quarterly basis, but could that be shared with the community?
Yes, it's a good question, and thank you for reminding me, because I remember we did have this conversation about statistics. I'm currently having a conversation with the police around a wider data picture and how I get access to data, because there's a lot to go through and it's not always defined in the most obvious way, helpfully. So Jen, can we pick that up? We will basically, the current practice is when I have an inspection meeting, they will go through all the statistics with me, and so that will happen on a kind of quarterly basis. But it's probably something we need to look at in terms of how do we get the data out a bit more regularly, and keep an eye on some of those statistics, because also it's useful for me then to be able to say, well, there's been a spike here, what are you doing about it, and we can respond a bit quicker. So yes, let me pick that one up, and I'll talk to the force in terms of how we get that data and how we can start to share some of that publicly. I'm sure we'll be able to do some of it. I just need to figure out the best way to do it, so I'll pick that one up. Okay,
and I had a second question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
It's around getting speeding drivers banned. Across the country, only 2% of drivers convicted at court for speeding are banned. And that's really low when you consider that most speeding offenses are handled out of court. And it's the really serious ones that get prosecuted. In Merseyside, it's even worse. It's only 1%. So in 2020, you had over 5,000 drivers convicted at court for speeding, but only 47 of them were banned. Is this something that you could take up with the Criminal Justice Board, with the magistrates, and say, it should be simple, it should be clear, if someone's going 20 miles over the speed limit, they ought to be banned?
Yeah, that's a good point. Not something I'd picked up before. Again, we'll take that one away. I'm not sure who it would sit with in the criminal justice world, but I can certainly have a conversation about the guidance that's given to magistrates and things when these are coming to court. So yes, thank you. I'll pick that one up as well. That's useful to look at. Thank you.
Vicky?
Yeah, I've just got a quick one about accountability. So in terms of like road safety priorities and what you'd be expecting from the police, how do you then hold them to account? Kind of what metrics would you be looking at in terms of saying whether they're delivering or they're not delivering?
So to be honest, that's probably still up for discussion. And so again, I'm open to feedback if there's any that you think would be particularly useful to look at. Predominantly, we tend to look at the numbers of killed and seriously injured at the kind of very basic level from past experience. That's what we've looked at previously. That obviously, because that's the one in terms of the most harm. if there's others that you think I should be looking at, you know, I can probably ask those questions. This is the kind of conversation I'm having now, really, around designing that scrutiny. So I'd welcome thoughts on what you think I should be looking at.
I think killed and seriously injured is a difficult one because so much is outside of the control of what the police are able to do in terms of enforcement to stop those deaths happening, I guess.
Okay.
I'm sure Amy, actually, not to put her on the spot, will have some thoughts here in terms of aspects of the metrics.
Yeah, great, Amy.
Yeah, one of the ones that we learned from the States is where they look at where the officer detected offenses are happening. So you have your limited resources, but how are you allocating? How are you using them? And in San Francisco, they were aiming to get, I think it was over 2/3 of their offenses on their high harm offenses. So you identify which are your priority and you set the target for how many of your total officer detected offenses should go there. So that's one way of measuring. Make sure that the police are focusing in the right areas.
Okay, well, that's useful to know. Yeah, we can have a look at that one. I don't know if Paul or Paulie, do you look at statistics at the Road Safety Partnership?
Yeah, I can begin to answer that one. It's something we're doing a lot more of now, and I think I'm going to be a bit controversial here. I know the numbers of killed and seriously injured is a really good. Is really important that we look at that as a measurement. But one thing I find a lot of now, I'm dealing a lot with communities and residents across Merseyside, and quite often they're alerting us, they're giving us information about the threat or the concerns that they have around road safety where they live. And in the past, when they've raised it, we would automatically look to those numbers of killed and seriously injured. If we discovered it was a fairly lowish number, then those residents really wouldn't get an awful lot of attention, I'm afraid, because with limited funds and limited resources, I guess there has to be some criteria to be applied as to where we spend that money and spend that officer time. So one thing I'm trying to do now is to try and, whilst those KSI figures are really important, it's equally important that we record the areas of concern and try and act before we get the KSI happening. So certainly I do keep a record of the stats, if you like, and with regard to enforcement, I'm now closely monitoring that too, particularly in the areas where we're getting the complaints. So that's something I can certainly help you with going forward.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that'd be helpful. I think if we pick it up as part of the road safety discussion, and obviously hopefully you're about to pass the new Vision Zero strategy, so that we probably lots of metrics that we want to think about what we could use to measure. So we can maybe come back to this group and just check if there's anything obviously we're missing. But yeah, thank you, that's very helpful.
Anybody else with a question? Joyce, did you want to ask?
Pauline, no. I did hear actually today on the political programme that more money has been invested in road safety, and it sounded as though this was just something that happened, very recently. So, when I say more money, I'm speaking in terms of the government allocation.
Oh.
I only sort of came in on the end of the conversation.
But I'm not aware of any specific funding for road safety, but I can go and double check. I must confess, the way the government are doing funding at the minute is wildly complicated, and there's lots of random funding that come up in very, strange and weird, wonderful ways. So it's entirely possible it's come through and I've missed it. But I'll double check, because obviously that'd be positive if they are starting to invest in it.
Thank you, Joyce. Can I ask, please? A lot of our families feel that they don't receive justice for the loss of their loved one. Many of our families have been told by the CPS it's not in the public interest to prosecute.
Yes.
How they live with that, I don't know. Is there anything that you feel that you will be able to do to bring about justice for those families?
It's a really difficult one. The challenge I have as a PCC is that I don't, as I said before, I don't have the same powers with places like the CPS and the courts. The CPS, they're very resistant to any kind of what they view as political interference from PCC. So it's a very, I'll be brutally honest, it's a very kind of softly approach you have to take with them, and as well that there'll be the national guidance. The challenge we have with something like the CPS is that, unlike Merseyside Police, which works very much on the Merseyside footprint, the CPS works at a national level, so they will very much take the steer nationally. So probably what we need to do is pick up this conversation with Alison Hernandez in terms of how do we, when we speak with the head of the CPS, what guidance are they giving to their lawyers in terms of what's deemed to be, in the public interest, because this isn't the only area I think where I have issues with the CPS and what they consider to be in the public interest. So I can certainly pick it up, but it's probably a national conversation because of the way that the CPS operates.
Thank you.
Oh, I think Amy, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I did. There was an initiative that was developed with the Hillsborough families. It's called Having a Listening Day, when the families sit down with the police and the CPS and the coroners, and they have like structured dialogue. They go through how they were kept informed and recommendations, and a report comes back, and it does feedback into practice changes. And that might be that would be great if you could do that at the local level. So the CPS could be hearing from the families about what are better ways to be communicating with them when they're not able to prosecute. But that was just something that really developed in Liverpool, so I thought it could be useful.
Yeah, great. No, thank you again. That's a really good idea. We'll pick that one up and see if we can do something locally around that. That's useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I really like that idea, and I think a lot of good could come from it.
Okay.
Merlin, did you want to ask another question?
No.
No. Okay, sorry.
Sorry, could I just ask a question, please, if you don't mind?
Yes, of course, Nicola. I'm glad you've been able to come back.
Sorry about that. All I wanted to ask was, I don't know if this is a minute, but it's to do with how long investigations take to conclude. I just find that it is having experience of the road traffic collision process with the police. I just felt like it took a long time to come to a decision about whether you were going to prosecute or not, and I just felt like a year to make that decision was quite a long time. And I just felt like the communication between us as a victim's family and the police sometimes, I mean, I do appreciate you're on about budgets and, you haven't got enough and things like that, but I just felt sometimes that the communication back in there, and my husband did actually die, and sometimes I just felt like I was banging my head off a brick wall trying to get any kind of response about whether there was going to be a prosecution, what was happening in the investigation, why it was taking so long. It just, from the start to the finish. I mean, we started in November 2018, and then we never then got to the inquest until 2020, beginning of 2020. So that was a long time, and I just felt like even now we're just concluding a civil matter, and it's just taken so much time.
Yeah.
I just felt like if it was another circumstance, like, forgive me for being blunt, if it had been like a murder investigation, sometimes I feel like everything is, because there's so much experience there in the police about the murder thing and how they would process it, whereas a road traffic, sometimes I just felt it was, I just got like a shrug of the shoulders, as if to say, well, that's just the way that it is. And it's upsetting really to have to experience it at all, or if you do that, maybe it could be a little bit more, I don't know, it just seemed to take so long, for them to be.
Did you have a family liaison officer?
Yes, I did, and she was okay, but I still just felt like it just took so long, it could have been a little bit more.
I'm at that situation at the moment. I mean, obviously not as long as you, Nicola, but my son was killed back in February, in North Wales. So there's the liaison with the North Wales Police and the Greater Manchester Police, where we're from, which is slowing things down because our liaison officer is telling us they hold things very close to the chest and it's their baby and they won't release any information to GMP. So basically all we know at the moment is the investigation is going as it should be, whatever that means. So, you know, I mean, the guy handed himself in 24 hours later. So obviously he's had, if he's had a drink, he's had time. I mean, I don't understand that law as well, because I've read up on it online correctly, or, you know, maybe you shouldn't do that, but it says they're allowed up to 24 hours to hand themselves in. So, but they, in that time, they can get the alcohol out the system, or they can clean the car or whatever, I don't know. I just don't understand why they're allowed that. But going back to the waiting game, so for us, it could take another 12, 18 months. And it's just the not knowing what's happening. The guy said that he thought he'd hit something. He thought he'd hit a tree branch, but when they seized his vehicle, he had a smashed windscreen. So obviously he knew he'd hit Stuart. And I mean, Stuart died from catastrophic head injuries. So you can't tell me the impact of him hitting that windscreen was just a tree branch. It's a joke, you know, and it's just so annoying. And I still not convinced that he will get, the CPS will take it on. I mean, you know, I think that he could get away with it, and that's upsetting as well, you know.
Yeah, yeah, and I think this is a challenge, isn't it? We just need to make sure that it gets taken as seriously as other offences, as you say, particularly when someone's at fault, when someone's been drink driving or whatever it is, and they've put that life in danger. Investigations across the board, I'll be honest, is a real challenge. There is a real shortage of detectives across the country. And that, you know, so actually, you know, although I take your point about kind of murder investigations, lots of investigations, even the really serious ones, are taking a lot longer than they should do. And I've raised this in lots of places, and obviously then you go to the wider criminal justice system and there's delays there. And I've heard so many times, like you've just said tonight, how frustrating that is, and just how the impact it has on you, you know, trying to kind of move on and deal with what's happened. So it is something I ask about a lot, and, you know, it's not something I probably have an easy answer to, but I'll take it away and we'll look at what we can do in terms of trying to improve that process, because there isn't an easy answer to it, but we do need to look at those investigations, because I know they are taking far too long, and then it's not great for victims. So yeah, we'll pick that one up.
Pauline, can I jump in here? It's Stuart McIver.
Yes, certainly.
Apologies for not joining you late. As you can see, I haven't got my video on. In sunny North Wales, the connection's not fabulous, and I've had problems joining, so I do apologise. Hopefully the connection isn't delayed like last time. Most people will know me online. My name is obviously Stuart McIver. I'm responsible for roads policing investigations. That's investigations across the board, starting with low-level collisions all the way up to fatal investigations. And obviously, there's been a number of concerns raised there about timescales, communication, support. What I suppose I really want to do is reassure those who are going through this process that every investigation, not just within Merseyside, I'm sure across the whole country, are taken at the highest priority. They're treated exactly the same as they would any investigation. Where you compared it to a murder, these investigations are taken as seriously as they are. The PCC is quite right. There are limited resources, but that's not an excuse. We work really, really hard to progress these investigations. There are numerous phases through investigations, and what we find is a lot of investigations are completed, or the investigative phase tend to be completed in a timely manner. In addition to the investigative phase, we've got like a forensic collision investigation phase then, and our forensic collision investigators are going through a national change nationally across the whole country. They are looking at professionalizing what they're doing, and it's falling under ISO accreditation. So every police force in the country that's got forensic collision investigators has to achieve a certain level, a certain standard, so they can operate. and there's an awful lot of work that has to go into that. I saw one of the ladies there was from collision was in North Wales. They are the lead for it. Investigations as a result of that are taking longer. The forensic collision investigation phase is a lot more timely, and there are a number of reasons for that. Investigations are becoming far more complex now. Vehicles are an absolute minefield of information. Cars no longer are just an engine, a steering wheel, brakes, etc. There are so many onboard computers within cars. There are some cars that have got up to 13 SIM cards on them, which all hold information. Cars have got infotainment systems which capture all kinds of information, and a lot of this data has to be interpreted and read, and this all takes time. And again, as I say, I'm not making excuses about the time, but it takes an awful lot of time to get this data, and sometimes to get this data, we have to send it off to manufacturers. And when we talk about manufacturers, one of the investigations we ran, we had to send off an airbag module to Romania to get the information. Then having got the information from Romania, we then have to get an expert to interpret it. It all takes time. And as the PCC mentioned, it then goes through the criminal justice process. And again, that takes significant amount of times. It can take in excess of 4, 5, 6 months to get a charging decision because of the internal mechanisms and the workload that the CPS carry. But I suppose what I really want to say is every investigation is taken as serious as it can be. Every investigation is important. And I know in Merseyside, we pride ourselves on doing the best investigations that we can and providing the best levels of service that we can. Sometimes, we would love to share as much information with yourselves as possible in relation to investigations, but sometimes it's really, really difficult because information that we share can, if it got out into the wider public, could undermine the investigation. So we have to be careful on what we do share. But what I want to do is try and share as much with people, with families as possible, so everybody understands what's going on. But we have to strike a fine balance on what we can share and what we can't share.
So I see, there you go. There's loads that I'm still getting to grips with. So, and there's a lot of work being done. So thank you, Stuart. That's helpful to share with people.
Yeah. Thank you, Stuart. And I think that's all the more reason why we need more resources coming to your department, so that we can, you can be able to do as much as you can, and not just for your department, but also for the Merseyside Road Safety Partnership, because I know that they've currently been inundated with people sending in photographs of people parking cars illegally. But I think they are finding it hard to deal with all the information that they get because of their limited resources.
Yeah.
So hopefully help will be available for them soon.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
Oh, I think Vicky.
Sorry, just one final one. I think hearing about people's experiences who either their loved ones been killed or if they've been seriously injured, it's difficult to capture what all of their experiences are. And would you consider perhaps launching kind of level of satisfaction surveys that would be conducted by the police to understand what victims of road crime are experiencing and what needs to improve, perhaps?
I think we already capture some of that information. Certainly, again, Stuart might know more, but I'm sure the police already ask questions around. I mean, they call it victim satisfaction, but the idea is it would speak to all different types of victims from different types of crimes and get some feedback as to how they feel their relationship, their experience with the police has gone. So I would be surprised if kind of road safety wasn't included in that cohort. But yes, certainly as part of the wider work I want to do with victims is having those conversations and actually trying to get that initial feedback, which is why meetings like this are very helpful, so you can hear kind of firsthand what the challenges have been. But yes, I'll look to do all of that, and I want road safety victims to be part of that conversation.
Cool, thank you.
That would be really good. So thank you for bringing that up, Vicky. Any more questions?
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I've been sent another one. If I could read it out, please.
Okay.
We have recently moved to Bromborough. partly due to the excellent public transport links, which we feel encourage people to travel on public transport rather than by road, thus improving safety and reducing environmental damage. But our impression is that driver behaviour here is poor, particularly around the E41, with a lot of aggressive and fast driving. What measures are being taken to A, encourage reduction of road use for public transport options, and B, tackle irresponsible and aggressive driving in this area? Unfortunately, I don't think the aggressive driving is just limited to the A41. I have found, particularly since lockdown has started to lift, that it seems as though drivers are just going mad. I've seen, I'm not out on the roads very much, but I have seen very, very poor examples of driving. So thank you.
To be honest, I wonder if Stuart or Paul might have a better, in terms of the specifics of what they're doing, because as I say, I'm still getting up to speed with what work's actually being done. It's something I've raised, you know, I know it's an area that we need to look at. I don't know if Stuart, have you got any more information about that particular work?
In regards to, or not just that specific area, across the whole of Merseyside,
Yeah.
there are countless initiatives being done, countless amounts of work being done. Paul, I think Paul touched on it there. We respond to community-led intelligence to do some targeted policing in relation to road traffic offences. But we've got to be really careful that we're not just responding to people who shout the loudest, because sometimes what we do find with people who do feed in and do report these incidents tend to come from certain areas, and individuals living in less or poorer deprived areas don't tend to report this as much. We've got to be really, really balanced in relation to that. In line with aggressive and dangerous driving, we've got our single online home, which I think I've talked about a couple of times, in which people can actually submit CCTV footage. Most people now, or I say most people, a lot of people now have got dash cams on their cars. People go cycling on their bikes or on their motorbikes. They have GoPros attached to their bikes. A lot of this information can be sent in. For example, if you witness it on your mobile phone, again, you can send it into single online home. And we've got officers that review this footage, consider whether offences are being made, and then determine what we're going to do with them. I mean, we've got a number of options that we can do. We can prosecute them. We can send letters of warning. We can send them on driver improvement and awareness courses. So there's an awful lot of work that's been done in relation to that. I know Paul will touch on community-led initiatives. I apologise, I've missed the update, but there are a lot of community-led initiatives that Paul's leading on. But there are also, roads policing-wise, a lot of the initiatives that we're doing with our bike team. So if we've got any antisocial driving, we tend to send the bike team with our ranger, which is more of a, it's not a covert way of capturing speed. It is overt. We stand at the side of the roads. Everyone's there in their yellow jackets, but we're able to go into locations where it's always been historically a little bit more difficult, because as a police officer, you have to, when you're using a speed camera at the side of the road, is stop the vehicle, speak to the driver, caution them, and report them for offences. So you have to be in a safe location to be able to do that, to stop vehicles, whereas with our ranger, it's all video captured, so it records the speed, it records the vehicles, the registrations, and take photographs of the drivers involved. So we capture all that information, so we're able to discourage that poor driving in those areas by doing that.
I think on top of what Stuart's just said there as well, I know you mentioned the A41 Bromborough. I do know there's been a local operation going on in that area, around the Bromborough area. There's been some street racing going on the industrial estates around there, and the police have been in attendance and prosecuting numerous drivers. It might not be connected to what's been reported, but there's a good chance it may have been. And they've been a lot of young male drivers in souped up vehicles who have been meeting and racing and what have you. So I have a feeling that might have already been in hand with the local police team doing some enforcement in the area. So, but just on top again of what Stuart said around communities, we do now ask communities to work with the local police teams a lot more closely than they did formerly, and they can actually go out with the local police teams and do enforcement of a kind, if you like. And we do sort of note drivers who are speeding or driving poorly, and we've got a way of reaching those drivers through letters, if you like, which we send to them along with some road safety information. So that's now up and running quite widespread across Merseyside now, with numerous groups set up to work with the local police to address those local issues. So it's proved to be quite a good piece of work.
Thank you very much for that, Paul and Stuart. And thank you, Emily. Do you have any idea when your police and crime plan will be ready?
Yes, so the consultation, it goes on till the 1st of August, so another few weeks. And then we'll be pulling all the feedback together throughout August, and then I have to take it to the police and crime panel. So I'm hoping it'll all be signed up by October, basically. So it's a couple more months to get it all done and get all the detail in. If Jen, can you put the link in the chat? So there is a link to an online survey as well. So if there's any other feedback that anybody wants to share about what you think should be in there, any specific projects or any priorities or anything, you can go on the survey as well. So that'll be open until August. But we will collate all of that and hopefully have it done by October. And then it'll be public and ready to go. And then we'll start to, hopefully see some action around it.
That's great. Thank you for explaining that. And I hope this is just going to be the first of the engagement we have with you. And I do hope that everybody who has joined us today will speak to their relations, their families, all their friends, neighbours, and encourage them to look at that survey and to fill it in to help decide the future of what's going to happen on our roads, especially on Merseyside. And I'm quite sure that Emily will take some of the national issues that we have raised forward to other PCCs. And I think if all the PCCs work together, they will be able to achieve a lot more than they can just achieve individually. Because yes, you can do an awful lot in this area, Emily, and I'm sure you will do. But I think there's also a place for you to work together with the other PCCs nationally. So I look forward to hearing of changes coming in the future and pressure being put on the government to provide more funding to help everybody who's involved in trying to keep us safe.
Yeah, I'll keep you posted.
Thank you. One last opportunity for anybody to ask any questions. Yes, Kelly?
Hi. I don't know if this is a question as such, and it goes in relation to what's going on in Bromborough and on the Wirral. There's through our local council, coming off the A41 through Port Sunlight, they've now put speed activated signs, so do under 30, thank you. We've managed to get one of them put in as well, coming from Clatterbridge through Spittal to Bromborough to slow down again the traffic that we're going through at 35, 40 miles an hour. One of the arguments that we kind of came up against with slowing these really busy junctions down was the impact it's going to have on people waiting in their cars and traffic, and delays on people's commutes. Emily, I'm just wondering if there's anything that can kind of go on a bigger scale with these kind of kickbacks from the councillors to why not to make these junctions safer or these roads safer, why it's an impact to delay the drivers getting from A to B. And if anything's sort of in the plan to do that when it comes to driver speeding or whatever. It's just a lot of information that I've taken on board in the last couple of months with why these big changes aren't being made to some of the most probably quieter junctions, but actually ones where the kill or seriously injured is quite likely to happen. A41 definitely, and then the junction that I'm referring to by my house, or two of the roads, are our slip roads that come off either the 53 or the A41 that still encourage the speed drivers. But yeah, the council are kind of saying we need to be careful with the safety crossings because we don't want to impact traffic jams. Does that make sense?
That's not something I've heard of before, and it does seem a bit odd. Again, I'm probably going to look to Paul or Stuart on this, because you obviously do some of that partnership work with the council. Is that something that we've picked up before?
Yeah, I can comment on this a little bit. I know I've worked with Kelly. It's great to see her again, and she's done some really, really great work in the Bebington and Bromborough area. So it's fantastic. Keep it going. I know the particular example that Kelly is referring to. I think in the past, it's not just about slowing the traffic down, it's about the impact that the queuing traffic can have on other roads. And I think certainly with regard to the Three Stags Crossroad, there was some mention that when the council previously changed that road layout, it has impacted on the nearby interchange at the motorway, which caused backlogs and obviously presented dangers elsewhere, if you like. So they do have a fine sort of balance that to do with regard to changing junctions, if you like, to attend to road safety issues, but also being aware of, are they moving a problem or creating a problem elsewhere by changing a particular junction? So it's not always easy to do. I'm not defending them in any way, but I know they do have a difficult decision to make with regard to, if they affect one junction, is that going to affect a junction somewhere else, if you like?
I think that's quite a common problem. I've come up against it with the campaigning that I've done for the area where my son died. I was told that they have to keep the traffic flowing, and that seemed to take precedence over keeping people safe, which obviously is not right.
No.
I know these are the sort of things that are often put forward as a reason for not doing something.
Liz wants to come in, and I assume it's Liz who's Councillor on the Wirral, so she might know more. I don't know if you want to say, Liz.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to get my video to work then. It's been going up really badly. I don't know if you can see me or not.
Yes, we can. Nice to see you.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, Kelly's been brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And obviously it's my area, Wirral, that she's talking about. And I understand why officers respond the way they do, and it's because of the feedback. They're taxed with their duty to keep the traffic flowing, and that's a short-term aim as well as a long-term aim. And so the long-term aim for me would, as somebody who's very, very concerned about road safety, would be reduce congestion by getting cars off the road when they're not needed, so people are walking, cycling, and you've reduced congestion by doing it that way. But that's clearly a long-term strategy, and officers are often made to think in terms of the short term by often by other politicians who have a different approach and a different view. They're made to think short term by campaigning and lobbying, sort of the car lobby, I suppose it could be referred to as, which is prioritizing just the status quo and keeping the traffic flowing by building bigger roads and just prioritizing car use rather than walking and cycling. And clearly it's a real problem. And if we could step back and get people to realize that unnecessary car journeys are causing the problem, you've solved the problem straight away, and you've also made the air cleaner. You're doing a bit for climate change and health and fitness and emotional well-being, and obviously road safety is a huge factor in this as well. But it's really hard for officers to deal with the backlash whenever you try to do anything long term. There's an immediate backlash, and that's okay facing with officers' response, because they get an earful from the car lobby every single time you try to change junctions. So if Kelly can carry on with her fantastic work, keeping residents going, getting them motivated, and getting that alternative perspective, and all the campaigners here, all the groups that try to get that alternative perspective, that car is not necessarily the answer to everything, and that we all benefit from spending less time in cars. If you can get that, keep going with that, and if everyone can help and just get that alternative perspective, because I think the majority of people, including car users, want the roads to be safer, and they want to solve congestion as well. But officers are dealing with a really, really organised vocal lobby group, and you just need to be bearing that in mind, that they're not necessarily dealing with the majority of people, and that's the voice they're hearing. So you just need to make sure that the counter narrative is being heard just as well. So Kelly, you're doing an absolutely fantastic job on the Wirral, and I'm sure there's people like you in all the different regions as well. So keep going, because we are listening. We're trying to listen to you. The politicians are trying to listen, and all the other groups who are doing their bit, we are listening, and we're trying to get the officers to see that as well. So yeah, brilliant. Well done for your work. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz.
And I second that. I've seen firsthand the work that Kelly has done, and it just shows what can be done when there is a will, and what can be done by volunteers. So if you feel that you have any time to volunteer to do any kind, any work in this sort of area, then do please get in touch with me or in touch with Paul, and I'm sure he'll make sure that you are put to good use. So thank you. Any more questions? Well, Emily, thank you very much for all the time that you have given us, and for all the thought that you have put in to what you're doing. And we hope that we will be able to continue to work with you for the benefit of everybody who uses our roads. So thank you very much indeed. I'm very grateful.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me today.
Okay. So the next thing on our agenda is the report from Merseyside Police from Stuart McIver. He's already taken part. So I'm very glad that you've been able to join us, Stuart. So can I pass over to you to see if there's anything else that you wanted to add?
There's a couple of things, and again, apologies for being late. The PCC was talking about e-scooters earlier, electric bikes and motorcycles. I think I had a conversation with you a couple of days ago about a lot of the work that's being done. I've spoken with the Inspector, Carl McNulty, who's leading on all of this for roads policing and for the organisation for the force. He's agreed to come, I think is it the November meeting?
Yeah. Yes.
So he's agreed to come to the November meeting, and he'll do a presentation.
Wonderful.
Exactly, he'll do a presentation on exactly what we're doing to target all of these offenders and the work that's being undertaken with working with you, working with all our partners to reduce the risk in and around e-scooters and motorcycles and off-road bikes. So if you can pencil him in for that.
That's great.
There's only a couple of things I really want to touch on. I know I tend to give some updates in around some of the enforcement stuff that we're doing. I just want to assure people all that work goes on all the time with our roads policing staff, with our ops support staff. What I wanted to touch upon is more around the investigative side this time, and how as an organisation we're professionalising what we're doing, constantly improving what we do. You'll probably be aware about 12 months ago, the HMIC FRS, and I struggle to say that, did a report where I think the report was roads policing not optional. Within that report, it was quite critical on the underinvestment in roads policing, and there were 13 recommendations that came out of it. I was pleased by those recommendations because the recommendations touched upon a lot of the stuff that we'd already done and already started. And I'm not sure if you were, we've had a new command team within Matrix. Matrix is our main area within the police, where we have all our specialist resources, where roads policing sits and all the investigations sit. We've had a new command team, and this command team are really, really, really supportive and proactive in around roads policing. We've got a real drive in around targeted enforcement, looking at what the issues are, what the problems are, and what we're doing to them, and are we being effective. We're refreshing all our meeting structures to look at how we're performing to reflect upon us. And I know you touched on about figures and updates. You know, we're using all this information to do targeted enforcement, working with Paul, but also looking at what communities are telling us, and also looking at problem profiles, you know, looking at data over the last 5 years, not just what's happening before us, and then trying to predict where our problems are going to be occurring. So we're becoming really, really proactive. But bringing it back to the investigative sphere, we're really improving what we're doing. From the 1st of July, there was national guidance submitted that all serious collision investigation units, and they're the teams that investigate road death, have got to be accredited. So they have to be what we call PIP level 2. PIP level 2 is an investigative qualification, which in old terms is what CID have, our investigation strand have. Those investigators that investigate the murders, investigate the shootings, they are PIP level 2 accredited investigators. All my staff are now either working toward it, because we've been really proactive in this field. We've actually preempted it. I've already got 2 people qualified and undertaken their portfolios. I've got another 3 people taking examinations this year to attain that qualification. In addition to that, the command team has supported us by creating it's like a management training function. We've reflected on our training. And I'll be brutally honest with you, the lack of sometimes the training and investment in our roads policing staff. And we've worked with our partners, Owen Mitchell, who have supported us with providing training material, training courses, and we're really upskilling all of our staff, not just the investigative side, all our roads policing staff, to increase their knowledge, to better equip them to investigate collisions. So the level of service improves from the very first second they attend at a collision. And I'm talking about collisions. All the preemptive stuff to prevent collisions is done. I'm talking about from when there are collisions. So we're better training the staff to investigate better, to gather information better, to improve investigations, to help gather this evidence, and when appropriate, support convictions for them. And we've had some real successes, and I don't want to go into them and go into, you know, some of them, but we've had some real successes with some of our investigations, and real significant sentences for drivers who have driven really badly and killed people. And, you know, a couple of the most recent ones have both been sentenced to, well, one recently was sentenced to an excess of 11 years, and one who was sentenced to 11 years reduced to 8 years because of the sentencing guidelines. So we are really doing everything we can to improve the service we provide. I'll hold my hands up, we don't always get it right. We strive to improve everything we do, and that goes as well for our family liaison officers. The family liaison role is really difficult, that conduit between ourselves, the investigation, and families, and providing those updates. And sometimes it can be really difficult for them because there aren't any updates. Investigations, as I mentioned earlier, do take longer, and a lot of the time we are waiting for reports. So a lot of on the ground stuff. So we've been out, we've captured the CCTV, the forensic collision strategy's been sorted. Our witness strategy's been sorted. We've captured all that information. It then becomes all about data gathering and getting that information. And when we kick into that phase, not a lot happens with the investigation because we are waiting. It's a waiting game for this information. And this is where the flows have that real difficult conversation with families, trying to reassure them that the investigation is progressing, but it looks like not a lot's happening, but it is in the background, an awful lot is happening. So I suppose all I really wanted to reassure people is we're reflecting on what we're doing, and we are striving to improve what we do. And you know, I'm confident that my team do wherever they can provide the best level of service. And I'm really proud of the team because we really do work hard.
Thank you very much, Stuart, and please pass on our thanks to everybody involved.
I will. I'm sorry if I sounded a bit passionate there. It's just we work really hard to investigate these jobs. We are a very small team. We talk about resources. We are a very small team, but we don't use that as an excuse. We go over and above. We do as much as we can all the time to provide the best level of service.
Thank you. And is there anything that we can do to support you and to get further help for you, better resources, then do please let us know.
I think you may have done that with the PCC. So she talked about Operation Uplift. Uplift is you know, increasing the number of staff. You know, I've presented to our command team about resources and the requirements for them, and they're listening. I mean, at the moment, I've got two sergeants who manage a massive, significant workload. We've got in excess of 50 ongoing investigations in our investigative sphere, and they're ranging from very early on to, you know, coronial process, which has taken years and years and years. But I've only got two sergeants now. It looks like I'm going to get a third sergeant. We've been given additional staff on attachment due to the workload because, unfortunately, we have seen a slight rise in our KSI figures. I know the figures aren't released, but you know, the number of collisions involving fatalities this time compared to this time last year, I've seen an increase. But I know we're working hard to reduce that, but we're also working really hard to investigate them.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Stuart? Vicky?
I've got two questions actually, if that's okay. The first one is the training that Owen Mitchell's providing. Is that just in Merseyside, you know, are they doing that more?
No, nationally. Now this is nationally. there's been recognised that there's a national shortage in qualified lead investigators, and the lead investigating officer qualification is like a detective sergeant's qualification, and there are only so many providers who can do that. Because of the turnover of staff, those who have been qualified have dropped away. Irwin Mitchell are leading across the country with supporting forces all over the country. I attended a reviewing officers course ran by Irwin Mitchell recently, and we had forces from down south, Devon and Cornwall. We had, where else were they? I think it was Northumbria were there as well. So it's national across the whole country. They are being really, really supported. But what we're not doing is relying upon them. This management training function that we're implementing, we're using all this information. We're training up our own staff. I think we're training up 4 or is it 5 trainers within roads policing to deliver this training. So we've got that knowledge, and we've got that, all this information, and then we can continue to develop ourselves. We don't have to rely on external providers like Irwin Mitchell who are supporting us.
Great, thank you. It's really interesting to know that. And then the other question was, so you said that now SCIU investigators have to be PIP level 2. Is that something that was issued by the National Police Chiefs Council?
Yeah, it is. Yes, it was I think it was one of the recommendations in the Roads Policing Not Optional paper.
Oh, fine.
I think off the top of my head, and yes, that direction has come out now nationally. So I think from the at least from the 1st of July, that's when we've done it from. So we've got a couple of people who are on attachment and want to come into our team. They are going through that process. We've got people within our team who have achieved it, and obviously others which are going to go through that process. I mean, we train our staff the same way we train our investigators now. We haven't historically. We've been, I don't want to say the poorer relation, but we're not now. All the investigative training we are getting. So, the crime strand in our academy, we are trained by them now, so we get the same level of training when it comes to interviewing. So we've got tier 3 interviews within roads policing, which is the same level, as our investigators dealing with these murders. So we're really, really improving and providing the ongoing CPD for them, because that's just as important as the courses.
Thank you so much. That's really good to hear. Thanks.
Thanks, Stuart. Any more questions, Stuart? No? Oh, yes, Amy.
Hi, Stuart. I just wanted to ask, I think it's down to the police discretion whether or not they allow families to have the right to review a charging decision. I know it's a national approach with CPS, but I think it varies by for police services. What's the policy in Merseyside? If a family asks for the police have decided not to prosecute, the family wants to request a review of that, will it happen?
I apologize if that question was directed at me. Then my computer completely froze, and I kind of came into the very back of that. So massive apologies. I've missed all of that.
Okay, shall I try again, or?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, it's around the right to review. This varies at the individual police level, and so I'm asking in Merseyside, if a bereaved family asks for the charging decision, if the police have decided not to prosecute, do they have the right to ask for a review? Will the police always review it?
Absolutely. Yeah, the Victim Rights Review Scheme is a national scheme, and we've got to. Yeah, absolutely. It's not just for the police, it applies to the whole criminal justice process. So if we decide not to prosecute, we have a right, victims have a right to question that, and we will review it. Likewise with the CPS, likewise all the way up the court process.
Okay. And I had another question, but it was around investigation. Do you mind if I ask that?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, it's around what nationally is known as Operation Snap, the third-party reporting with the dash cam. How's that going in Merseyside? Because I think you were changing your system.
No, we are using Single Online Home, which I think is the national system, which everyone's using. I think the Met introduced it with Andy Cox. I'm 100% sure. It's going really, really well. We are getting some really positive results. Do we get as many submissions as we would like? Probably not. Could we cope with many more submissions? We would massively struggle. If we suddenly got a massive influx of them, we would struggle with them. But yeah, we're doing really, really well. The system we use is a national system. It works. We don't have any problems with it, but we do what we can. We do as much as we can with it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. So now I think the next person on the agenda is Paul from the Merseyside Road Safety Partnership. Thank
Hello,
you.
hi. I will try and keep it brief for obvious reasons. But as you know, I do tend to ramble, so do interrupt me if I do go beyond the kickoff time. I'll get shot by certain people. Just really an update from the partnership. I think it was mentioned earlier on by the PCC with regard to our new strategy that we're hoping will be passed shortly, and we're really looking forward to putting that into practice because it's focusing on Vision Zero and also around safe systems of road safety, which is really bringing in and placing a lot more responsibility, not just on the police for enforcement, but on local authorities for engineering and various other strands, if you like, to really address the issues that pose a threat to road safety. So I'm really, really looking forward to that getting through the final, if you like, the finishing line, and we can then really sit down with all our partners across Merseyside and really look at not just have a strategy, if you like, but really put it into practice and be accountable for how we've done that. So I'm really, really relishing the idea of that. So we'll wait and see how that goes. It's taken a long time to come through, and we have consulted externally with the likes of Jeremy Leach and people like this. So I'm really hopeful that we've got a really good strategy and we can start to make a real difference. Having said that, I was looking at stats today from Merseyside, and a lot of people put our last year's fatality stats and KSI stats were a lot lower than the previous year. And I know a lot of people attribute that to the COVID-19 issue. But when you look back 5 years, we've seen a continual trend, a decreasing trend in casualties. So it's not just down to COVID. We have been making some quite good progress across Merseyside for a number of years now. We're hoping to continue that into this year, although I know we've got some challenges around the number of fatalities, as Stuart alluded to. We have seen some really bad crashes this year already, and we're just over halfway through. So he also mentioned about the National Policing Review, which, whilst it was really, really critical of the police and certainly the way that road policing has been dealt with, I think in the longer term it will be a real benefit for road policing, because certainly in Merseyside, like everywhere else, we really suffer from a lack of investment. But I think this review that's taken place and the recommendations that have come from it are really putting some pressure on chief constables to look at how they do road policing. It's not an optional thing. It's something that they really do have to invest in. So hopefully we'll see the benefits of that. And certainly, I've spoken before about drink and drug driving, which is an area, my sort of field of expertise. And I know, looking at some stats again, there's been a significant lack of breath testing, for example, nationally. I looked at stats today, which said that in 2009, the police in England and Wales conducted 80,000 breath tests. And yet 10 years later, that figure dropped to 30,000, obviously due to a lack of road policing officers. So we're already looking to address that in Merseyside. And I'm really looking to work with with road police and local police to see how we can address the declining number of breath tests in Merseyside and hopefully reduce the numbers of people who get arrested for drink driving. So that's another one of my sort of pieces of work that I'm really looking forward to getting my teeth into. With regard to an update, I'll keep it brief. I mentioned earlier on, we've got our initiative Safer Roads Watch, which is really, it's kind of blown up in my face, really. I didn't want it to be a success, and it's certainly, I'm having no shortage of people wanting to step up and become police volunteers and go out with the local policing officers and PCSOs and really affect the way that people use the roads. I can give you a case in particular, certainly where I live locally in Upton on the Wirral. We've seen a fatality recently with a cyclist hit by a vehicle, and that's prompted a lot of complaints from local residents around a lack of police enforcement or perception that the police don't enforce the limit very well, and also put pressure on the council to bring in reduced speed limits and speed humps, which just simply weren't possible to do. So we've got some signing up as volunteers. We've been going out and doing operations at the roadside, detecting lots and lots of speeding cars. And as I say, the owners of those cars receive a kind of a package, if you like, of road safety information, which is addressed to them and in particular the speed that they were driving at. And we're getting some really good feedback, not just from the volunteers, but from the people who've actually received the letters. So that's a Pan Merseyside initiative, if you like. So it's a big piece of work. But thanks to the local policing teams, it's actually being put into practice now, and operations are starting to happen more and more frequently, more and more drivers being reached, if you like, through these packages. And hopefully we can see a kind of a long-term change in the way they use the road. So that's quite a big piece of work for me. I mentioned about police cyclists. I'm just now starting to get back into schools, if you like. That's something I did pre-COVID. We're going to schools and speak to teenagers around driving issues and what they think driving is going to be like when they turn 17 and start to learn to drive. And we've got our scheme on Merseyside and Cheshire West called Engage, which thankfully now the instructors are now back in full-time employment. They're seeing a huge upturn in the numbers of people who want to learn to drive, which means more and more people are being reached through our Engage scheme, which is a really good scheme. So that's another good plus point, if you like. The only flip side for me going into schools was I had to isolate for a week because somebody in the school tested positive, and obviously I got hit by the test and trace app, if you like, and I've had to stay home. Certainly, I did have to pending the test, so that's been quite frustrating, but never mind, that's part of the job. We've got our road safety pledge in Merseyside, which has had a slow take up, I have to say. It's been quite disappointing, but because of COVID, we've not been able to go out and promote it as much as we would like. So that's hopefully going to change in the foreseeable future. And I certainly hope everyone here who's in Merseyside, if they haven't done already, will go to the website, see the pledge and sign themselves up to it. You'll get a quarterly newsletter about what's going on in Merseyside around policing, road policing, and around road safety. So it's certainly worthwhile doing it. And I expect you all to sign up to it. And finally, I think what I'll say is I know I went to the service last year at the end of August. I've spoken to Pauline about this at the end of August. And we have the real heart-rending, if you like, film clip by Cara Lee, I think her name was, whose husband was killed, Kira Lee, whose husband was killed on the road. And I was really, really deeply affected by the film that was shown. And I was so deeply affected, in fact, I actually emailed the ACC, Rob Carden, who was present at the ceremony, to ask really that would it be possible for me to reuse that clip to really sort of do a bit of internal marketing around police on the roads and road safety with police staff and police officers. He was really in favour of it, but for one reason or another, it's taken an awful long time to progress, but I've never let go of it. And just recently, I've had some good news from our media team to say that they're finally in a position now where we can actually do this piece of work. So I've written a short speech for our ACC. He's going to introduce it, and that film clip will be shown. If you've not seen it, I do recommend you do. He's going to show that to hopefully every police officer in Merseyside will get to see that, and we can sort of remind them of the value of what they do on the roads and the importance of doing real, visible and proactive enforcement to try and reduce the numbers of speeding drivers and drinking drug drivers, etc. So that's just been recently done, and I'll certainly let you know, and I'm happy to share with you what that introduction looks like as and when it's been done. So I've got a lot written down here, but I think that's enough from me anyway. So over to you, Pauline.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'm delighted that Kira's film is going to be shared more widely, and I'm sure it will have an impact on the police who watch it and realise how important their job is in investigating, but B, in preventing. So thank you for all that you do and everybody else in your team. Okay. Any questions, Paul? No. Thank you. So now it should have been Andy Codd from Liverpool City Council, but as I explained earlier, he can't come. He has told me that the long-awaited crossing project has been postponed yet again because it wouldn't have been practical to hold the experiment during lockdown, but it is likely to be put into place when lockdown is lifted completely. So we will see what comes from that. Otherwise, I think like many places, the road safety team have been affected by people being like Paul was in school, coming into contact with COVID. So they've had to struggle with things like that. But I'm sure we'll have an update from him at our next meeting, which hopefully will be at the normal time. And now I've got great pleasure in introducing Karen Blair, who is the new CEO of Aftermath Support. So are you there, Karen?
I am. I was debating whether to
introduce yourself. Congratulations on your post.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to introduce yourself briefly. Thank you.
Yeah, I will make it as brief as possible. Thank you very much. It was so informative and helpful being here this evening, Pauline, so I do appreciate the invite. And I am available for the next couple of weeks, obviously new in post. My head's still spinning, but I'd like to offer the opportunity if anybody would like to contact me to have a catch up and a chat. I'd really appreciate it. I've spent the past 15 years in the third sector, came in as a volunteer working at Willowmind for people with mental health as a support worker. I quickly moved into advocacy, and that's where I've sort of stayed for the last 10 years. Moved over from an organisation called Encompass. I don't really know how far into detail to go, and keep that guessing going, so you can give me a ring and come and have that cup of tea or coffee and find out a bit more about me. I really appealed to me to join Aftermath. I come from a long line of police officers in the family, and many years spent with my mum, who had a driving school. So that whole sort of area has always been in my life. And I had an experience myself as a witness of a really serious accident many years ago, which stayed with me for an awfully long time. However, I didn't get the opportunity to be supported through it by an organisation like Aftermath. And the people that I've worked with in advocacy who've been affected by road traffic collisions, again, probably could have been supported by an organisation similar to Aftermath, who was more bespoke around the situation they were facing. So that's where the motivation comes from for me in this role. Spending the next couple of weeks reviewing policies, processes, making sure we're fit for the future, to holistically help people and meet their needs as much as we can in such devastating circumstances. And that'll do, I think. We've all got somewhere to go, haven't we?
Thank you very much, Karen. And we look forward to you joining us at our other meetings in the future. So
I'm really privileged to be here. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. So now, Vicky, I wonder if you could just briefly give a few updates from RoadPeace Northwest, RoadPeace National.
Yes, certainly. It'll be the fastest update of your lives, so that we've got time for the football. So yes, very quickly, we had our AGM last month, which is up online if anyone wants to watch it. Also encourage anyone who's new and wants to find out more about RoadPeace, we've got an e-news, and you can sign up to that on the website. There's a subscribe button. In terms of the kind of justice and campaigning work that we've been doing, some of you may have seen it was Global Road Safety Week back in May, and DCS Andy Cox did a huge run for us. He ran 200 kilometres from the site of the first road death, which was in Crystal Palace, all the way to the National Memorial Arboretum, and raised £50,000 for us, which was incredible. But perhaps more importantly, raised a lot of awareness around road danger issues, and he published a call to action letter at the end of his run. And I think it's been fantastic working with him, because I think he's a really big advocate in terms of road danger reduction and better treatment of victims. And what he's called for is for MPs to read out the names of people who've been killed in Parliament on the roads, to increase length of driving bans, to close the exceptional hardship loophole. That's where drivers who've got more than 12 points on their licence are allowed to continue to drive on the roads when they plead exceptional hardship. also called for greater use of dash cams, speed limiters and event data recorders. And also for the way that road crime is discussed in the media to be changed. He kind of outlined that it's not really reported on enough, and it's too much treated as an inevitability. And that's something that RoadPeace has campaigned on for a long time with our Crash Not Accident campaign. On that note, there's been recently some guidelines on reporting road crashes for journalists to use that have been published, which we hope will change the way crashes are reported. And his final call was around car industry and car manufacturers, and for there to be less focus on the speed of vehicles, and for manufacturers to do more for road safety. So yeah, it was fantastic to have his support during UN Global Road Safety Week, and we hope that all of the awareness that he generated continues. The second thing in terms of justice is the coroner inquiry. So last year, the Justice Committee opened an inquiry into the coronial system. That was to understand if some of the changes that have been implemented, I think in 2013, if they were having the desired effect, and also how the coronial system was doing. Thanks very much to all of our RoadPeace members who submitted evidence to the inquiry. I gave evidence orally at the inquiry last year, and then about a month ago, the committee published their report, and it was fantastic to read because it included so many of the things that we've called for over the years. RoadPeace has campaigned for a long time for improvements to the coronial system. And it's important because most road deaths don't end up in a criminal prosecution, and they end up having an inquest. And we hear, from speaking to families, that there's often lots of issues with those. But yeah, it was great to see the report, and all of the recommendations are things that we called for. So things like a national coroner service, things like that. That's also available. We've got a blog up on that, about that on the website, if you're interested to read more. The other update is around the police crime and sentencing bill, which is currently going through Parliament. That's something that you may have seen in the news. That's what all of the Kill the Bill protests are about. There's lots and lots of things in that bill, and lots of them not to do with anything with road safety or road traffic offences. But what has been included is 3 of the things that were promised back in 2017 by Chris Grayling. The 3 things are a new charge of causing serious injury by careless driving, extending the maximum sentence for death by dangerous driving from 14 years to life in prison, and increasing the maximum sentence for causing death by careless driving whilst under the influence to life in prison. And whilst we're not necessarily against those proposals, we're kind of cautiously supportive, I would say. They don't really deal with a lot of the big issues that we have with the offences framework. So we're working with a number of other organisations like Cycling UK and Road Danger Reduction Forum, Living Streets and British Cycling. They produced some briefings around this, and the things that we're calling for as amendments to be added to the bill is for a clearer definition around careless driving and dangerous driving, increasing length in mandatory driving bans, addressing the issue around hit and run. The charges for that are no good at the moment. So we're calling for an aggravating factor within fail to stop, which would mean that if someone's knowingly left the scene of a fatal or serious injury collision, the maximum sentence would be 14 years. And there's the other one was around car dooring, because that's something that affects cyclists, and people do end up being killed from that as well. And then the final update is around National Road Victim Month. So August is National Road Victim Month. I'm sure most of you know about the events that Pauline organises. As well as that, we're asking people to get involved in terms of fundraising throughout the month. I'm also going to be organising 2 webinars, the dates for which are to be confirmed, but one of them will be around hit and run, which I think is particularly timely with the bill. And the second one, I think, will be around the need for advocacy and casework support for crash victims. That's unfortunately, this people need spokespeople, and that shouldn't be the case. And of course, we've got the Wood event that we would hope to be able to hold in person, but we'll have to see how that goes, and we'll keep you updated on that. So I think that's it from me. That was a very quick update.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Does anybody have any pressing questions for her? I'm sure she would always answer any questions by emailing. And a lot of this information is on the web. So thank you very much. So now it's just a local update. We are continuing to hold our monthly support meetings. Last Friday, we had 13 bereaved people joined us. And as ever, I was so amazed at the strength that those people showed. We've got some very brave women that were present, and I admire all the things that they are doing. And I particularly want to mention Janice for the campaign that she started. She lost her brother just over a year ago, and her campaign was featured on Granada Reports on Monday evening. So well done, Janice. And I know that you are working hard to try and bring about some of the changes that you feel are necessary. Our next evening meeting will be on the 1st of September, and we are very lucky to be able to have Andy Cox coming to join us. So I hope that you'll all be able to join us for that. And then the November meeting, I'm very pleased to say that we'll have Carl McNulty to talk to us about the e-scooters and what the police are doing about that. I've been invited to join a meeting with the new Chief Constable a couple of weeks ago, and it was during our conversations then that she suggested that Carl comes to talk to us. That was in response to my question about e-scooters and things like that. Petra and I have been working with the Liverpool Football Club, as well as Paul and some other partners, to develop our plans for another tournament for the RoadPeace Cup. This is through Kickstart Safe Roads, and on the 29th of October, we're hoping that that will take place. I've been in discussions with Liverpool Cathedral about the possibility of holding our remembrance service in person, and I'm hoping that the wonderful installation of the peace doves might still be there, and that we might be able to hold our service underneath those doves. That would be wonderful if we could. And then we want to hold a remembrance in St. George's Hall in November. That's the 21st. Petra has been very busy progressing the memorial at the National Memorial Arboretum, and hopefully that will be unveiled in August. Both Petra and I are trustees, and we are hopefully trying to move things forward with lots of different things. But any of you who feel that you need more support, please know that the RoadPeace helpline is there, and that the Preventer service is there. And if you'd like to know more about that, get in touch with the office or get in touch with me, and I'll do whatever I can to help. Sorry, that was a whistle-stop tour, but for obvious reasons. Does anybody have any other business? Is that somebody speaking? No?
I think it was just a bit of background noise.
Okay, all right. Well, it just leaves me to thank every one of you for joining us and for taking part in this. I hope that you will fill in the PCC's survey. I'm sure that you all have things that would be of benefit to her, so please put them into your survey response, and do encourage other people to do that. Meanwhile, keep safe, look after yourselves, and I look forward to seeing you soon. And I hope if you're going to watch the football match, that somebody's got a nice hot cup of tea or something stronger for you when you do it. But thank you very much for joining us. It's been lovely to have you all with us, and especially those who are with us today for the first time. So thank you all. Goodbye.
Thanks, Pauline. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Pauline.
Right, well, I might just end the meeting then, Pauline.
All right, well, thank you very much
Thank you
for everything.
No worries.
Will the chat be saved?
I've copied and pasted the link somewhere else, so I've got the link for the survey.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else really in the chat that's of much interest, I don't think. Just some thank yous. And then the recording, it's recording and it will stop recording now.
Okay, thank you very much. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.